Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, slightly damp neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pod, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, CastBox, Audible, Player FM. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Two wonderful guests coming to you today. First up, Heather Avis is here to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called I Like You So Much. Later in the show, Teresa Argenbright will be here to celebrate Charlotte and Penelope and the neighborhood stage. The Daytime Began, beautiful new picture book by Mary Ellen Roberson, available at maryellenroberson.com.
In the dawn of the world, when colors were born, a gentle voice whispered, let there be morn. From mountains to rivers and skies up so blue, the daytime began. Oh, what a beautiful view. With every beat of the heart, in the breeze of the land, nature was singing as life took a stand. Oh, the wonders, the colors, the creatures so bright, in the pages of a story that brings pure delight. With every turn of the leaves, can you feel the cheer? The daytime began, let's celebrate here.
If you are a regular listener of Reading with Your Kids, you know how much I love Clowns Without Borders. ClownsWithoutBorders.org. I would love for you to visit that website and consider becoming a joy maker. Clowns Without Borders sends clowns to disaster areas, refugee camps, anywhere around the world that people really need to smile. Clowns Without Borders, we're there. Right now, my friend Josie May and three other amazing artists are entertaining kids who really need a smile in Zimbabwe. We would love for you to help them bring those smiles, make that happiness a reality by going to clownswithoutborders.org and consider becoming a joy maker. Your monthly gift can bring a smile to a kid who really needs it. clownswithoutborders.org. Join us right now from Southern California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called I Like You So Much. Please welcome to the show New York Times bestselling author Heather Avis. Hey, Heather, how are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
Delighted to have you on. Through the magic of technology, which didn't work perfectly today, I am able to look into Heather's office, and I see right behind her there is a poster that says narrative shifter. I have a feeling that's what you are.
Yes, that's what I strive to be, a person who shifts narratives that need shifting. Not all do, but there are quite a few that do.
So what narrative are we shifting with I Like You So Much?
Ooh, that is the question. Okay. So let me give you a little background, if I may. I have three kids, and all three of my kids came to me through adoption. And my youngest and my oldest both have Down syndrome. And where Narrative Shifter came from initially, this was before I was writing children's books, was there was this narrative around Down syndrome that was very negative, that was very harmful to their well-being as humans, that I believed, and it almost kept me from adopting my children. And then I brought them into my life and realized, oh, this narrative that's being told around Down syndrome is not only not true, but it's really harmful for people with Down syndrome and for the rest of us who then are disconnected from them because of this harmful narrative. So I started talking about shifting the narrative around Down syndrome, telling the real, true story of loving a person with Down syndrome. And so then that, go
right ahead. Go right ahead.
So that has spilled over, that idea of shifting a narrative, into the books that I've written for children. And my most recent children's book, called I Like You So Much, the narrative that I'm hoping to shift, or the narrative that I want to support, is for all children, no matter who they are, to be able to see themselves in the story. And not just because of what they can do or what they've overcome or how they were born into the world, but just simply by existing. And I am a lover and a connoisseur of children's books, as you are, Jed. And there are so many incredible picture books out there that are necessary and good, telling the story of an overcomer, right? Telling the story of an achiever, shifting that narrative of this kind of person we've been told will never do A, B, C, or D. Let me tell you a story otherwise. Those stories are all very good, and not all kids can see themselves in it. So I Like You So Much is a love letter to my children, to all children ever, that lets them know who you are as you are. You are good, and I like you just because you're you, not because of what you can or can't do.
Well, I like this book so very much for lots of different reasons. But first, before I get into that, I want to thank you for adopting two beautiful kids. All three of your kids are adopted. And that is beautiful. We have celebrated parents who have the courage and the generosity and the love to adopt kids. There's between 360 to 400,000 kids in the foster care system every day here in the United States alone. To be able to open up your home to a kid who needs a forever home is a beautiful thing. We hear people celebrating adopting pets more than we hear the celebrations of people adopting other human beings. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. It's a beautiful thing, and I want to thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Jen.
Talking about kids with Down syndrome, I just looked it up to make sure I didn't give any bad countries, calling out any countries inappropriately, but I was horrified a number of years ago when I was reading that countries like Iceland and Denmark were going out trying to eradicate Down syndrome. And that, to me, is somebody has loved many people who have Down syndrome and other disabilities, was horrific to me. What did you feel when you read that?
Yes, there was an article that came out a while ago, and then I think in 2021, The Atlantic did an article called "The Last Child with Down Syndrome," and they went to Iceland and talked to the handful of people who have a child with Down syndrome in the country. I mean, it's really sad and disheartening, right, to say the least. It's incredibly offensive in other ways. I mean, how do I look at my children and they hear that kind of a story and what it communicates about them? It makes me really sad for people in a whole country that fails to see the value and worth in somebody who functions differently in the world. And it also hits really close to home. It's very real in that if my kids didn't have Down syndrome, their families would have parented them solely based on, like I said earlier, this narrative around what Down syndrome is and how fearful they were for that. And it's complicated. Adoption is very complicated. It's not one reason there, but that is a large piece for my kids, right? Like that, this false idea around Down syndrome is severing relationships in families. In the United States, the statistic, as I know it right now, is at least 70% of women who get an in utero diagnosis for Down syndrome choose to terminate solely based on a diagnosis. So it's not even like a pro-life, pro-choice situation here. It's just lack of information and ignorance about a diagnosis in a population of people. So yeah, I'm really passionate about it. I feel disheartened and heartbroken for so many people around the world and then whole countries trying to eradicate people with Down syndrome, that they just are missing out on this big, beautiful human story that involves disability and involves people who are different, and it makes us better humans. Like our collective humanity is better and stronger when we are doing life alongside people who are so different than we are, because it gives us empathy, it gives us understanding. I mean, if you live long enough, you will become disabled, right? Like you will enter into that demographic of people. And so how can we better understand the people that we very well could become, right? And have empathy and love and generosity and create belonging for all kinds of people.
It's funny that you mentioned that because about 2.5 years ago, just a few feet from where I am right now, I missed a step, landed on my feet, and ended up in a wheelchair for about 4 months, and then 18 months of physical therapy. So you're absolutely right. Things can change in a heartbeat. So yes, I'm glad people were very kind to me and
Yeah,
because I wouldn't have been able to get back, able to walk without their help.
right. Yeah. And disability, it doesn't discriminate. That's the thing. Disability does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone. Like there can be an accident, or it can just happen to anybody. I think we're so quick in our culture, and just in maybe humans in general, but especially in our culture, to categorize disability as like good or bad, and it's always in bad, but it's kind of just neutral. It's a part of the human experience. And if we can reframe it as a part of the human experience, then I think we can create this idea of belonging for all people, which is really what all my children's books have been about, like finding and creating spaces of belonging for all different kinds of people, not just people with disability, but all of us. All of us are wanting that kind of belonging. And so how do we reframe the stories, or make sure we tell the bigger story around Down syndrome, around disability, around being a human?
Yeah. So let's dispel some of those ideas about Down syndrome. First off, please tell everybody what Down syndrome is.
Yes, Down syndrome is, in the shortest definition, an extra copy of the 21st chromosome. People are born with 46 chromosomes. Most people are born with 46 chromosomes, 23 chromosomes, 2 of each. And people with Down syndrome, their 21st chromosome has a third copy, and they have 47 chromosomes. And that third copy is what makes a person with Down syndrome have Down syndrome. So oftentimes people with Down syndrome have intellectual disabilities. They have lower muscle tone. There's physical characteristics that are like an almond-shaped eye, a flatter nose, bridge in the nose, usually shorter stature. And there's a handful of characteristics that go under that umbrella, that syndrome umbrella for Down syndrome.
And I think, most people would sit back and say, oh, Down syndrome kid, they're not going to be able to do this, they're not going to be able to do that. But as we've celebrated here, there are kids with Down syndrome who are graduating from college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are. I love that you brought that up. So for so long, and still, the story around people with Down syndrome is one that is very limited, and people with Down syndrome over and over and over again are breaking through those limits, and showing the world, like you had, 30, 40 years ago, a parent would get a diagnosis at birth, and a medical professional would say, your child will probably never say your name. They may never know who they are, right? And so that wasn't that long ago. We're combating that narrative, but also this, well, your child will never. And people with Down syndrome are like, look what we can do. All those things you said we'd never do, we can do. And Jed, this is really important to me, and especially for my most recent book, I Like You So Much. All of that is true. And those stories are so critical for the Down syndrome community and for the world to understand what it means to be a person with Down syndrome. And still, the disability of Down syndrome does limit a lot of people with Down syndrome who aren't ever going to go to college, who aren't going to drive a car, who aren't going to hold a job, who aren't going to get married. Like all these things that we're combating, these stories, it's also true for people with Down syndrome that they might not do those things. Right. And the greatest invitation that I have 2 kids with Down syndrome. My kids with Down syndrome have given me is this invitation of saying, the starting place that we are, that gives you value and worth as a human, is that you have breath in your lungs, you have a heartbeat in your chest, you can love and receive love. like that is where we're going to start. And that makes you a human who has a place to belong in this world, and you're meaningful and have value and worth. So there's like this pendulum swinging in this narrative about Down syndrome, right? That I'm hoping in my messaging to get somewhere in the middle, where it's like, this is great, all that you can achieve as a person with Down syndrome. And guess what? If you do none of that, you are so good and you are so valuable, of a place in this world and of your story being important and being told.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because the people in my life with Down syndrome have an incredible capacity to love.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, that's pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really, when I start to, like in therapy, because I'm in therapy because it's good for my heart and my mind and my soul. But my therapist and I will often talk about, like, what's the thing that tethers me, right? Like the thing that I go to keep me from flailing out of control when life feels so much. And it always comes back to love. Like these people in my life who I love genuinely and who love me back. Yeah. I feel like the landing place is always love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell us about the story we're going to experience when we cuddle up with our kids and we read I Like You So Much.
I Like You So Much was really inspired by my youngest son, August, who has Down syndrome, and he's not named in the book, but there is a character that is drawn in his likeness, and it shows up on most of the pages, and you get a little glimpse into this character, into what he loves and the things that are important to him and the way that he expresses empathy. And I Like You So Much isn't a story with a plot, a beginning, middle, and end. It's more of a love letter of affirmation for the people that you're going to read the book to. And it starts by saying, hey, kid, I like you so much. And then it goes through all of the things and the reasons to like this kid. And the kid could be the kid you're reading the book to, really, ultimately. And it starts with, like, I like your face. And then it goes through, I like the way you love, and I like how you're empathetic, and I like how you do your best. And how doing your best doesn't mean a first place ribbon. It just means showing up and doing what you can do best. And then it ends with saying the most likable thing about you is that you are you. And what this whole wide, wild world needs the most is for you to be you. And so I want kids and parents reading it. What I love about writing children's books is that, picture books especially, an adult is going to need to read it too, right? I feel like it's like this sneaky way to get adults to read a message that we as children's book authors want to put into the world. It's not sneaky, but it's a benefit, an added bonus to being a children's book author. And so I want adults to hear it too, right? Like almost this like shoulders down exhale when we're in this world that is trying to put so much pressure on us to be so much and to do so much. And it's really difficult to find a place where you just get to exhale and just be told you are good because you're you. It's like, oh, okay, this is nice. Yeah.
I love that. I have to tell you, I began my advocacy and it certainly pales in comparison to what you're doing, but my advocacy for folks with disabilities started back before it was cool, back in 1987. And it came from a place, I'll be very honest, of that I'm kind of ashamed of. I was working as a lifeguard in a pool in a mental health facility. And I'd heard that there's a school in the building and the kids are going to come down, they're going to swim. And I'd been working with people in human services. And I'm like, oh, great, that's fine. But these kids had severe developmental disabilities. They were ranged in age from 9 to 18, and they really couldn't do anything for themselves. And it looked very different. And I was, as they wheeled into the pool, making the noises and whatnot, I was scared. Yeah. And I was ashamed of myself because of that. And I was determined that I was going to get to know these kids. And I did. And the way I did, I went up and I'm just kind of observing in the school. And there was this little kid who's 12 years old. He might have weighed 20 pounds. and he was in his wheelchair, and he just looked so tiny and so weak. And his teacher came out and said, "Okay, you got to get yourself into the room, Alfie. Let's go." And I thought to myself, what a witch talking to that poor little kid like that. And she walked away. And when the kid realized that there was no one in the hallway, he didn't see me. He's looking around, and then he wheels himself over to get himself an extra snack. And I thought, dude, that's what I did when I was 12 years old. And I immediately saw the connection to him. And after that, it was so easy, and to the point where they hired me to advocate for them and to develop a program that was integrating them into different activities. And it was a hugely successful program that we documented in a video. And and it's little things like that where you are able to open up your eyes. Suddenly, you're looking at the same thing and you're not able to see. And then one little thing happens and it's like magic. It's like, whoa, he's just like me.
Yeah, yeah. What you said at the beginning of that story, Jed, how you felt afraid, right? And what were you, like, if you think about it, what were you afraid of? Like,
I can't tell, I don't know.
But I would wonder if you're afraid of what you don't know, right? Like, we're all afraid of this. When something comes at us or there's something in our lives that we are so unfamiliar with, usually our feeling is one of like apprehension or fear, or like, I don't want anything to do with this because we have no clue what is happening, right? We've never experienced it before. And that's so true for disability. And in our home, we say a lot with our kids, like, you can't know what you don't know. So that feeling of shame, to put that feeling of shame on not knowing, it's wrongly placed because you can't know what you don't know. How could you? It's the shame is more placed on when the opportunity for knowing is in front of you and you choose to go the other direction. I think maybe, I don't know, yeah, that's where the problem lies, in my opinion. Otherwise, that unknown, when you have an opportunity to know, then it's an opportunity for learning and growth. And then, like you're sharing, then the unknown becomes known, and guess what? It's not scary anymore. It's like, oh, this is a person. This is a way of living. This is a way of being. And then you can jump into it in such a meaningful way. I love that story.
Thank you. Yeah, I formed lifelong friendships with some of the kids. In fact, just one of the little girls who was kind of my partner as we advocated and opened up doors. They told me when she was 10 years old, if she was lucky, she might make it to 18. And we attended her funeral just about a year ago, and she was 45.
Wow.
Wow. Life with her family. One of the things, Heather, and this is that person, her name was Jennifer, and Jennifer's mom and dad were beautiful, and two younger siblings, beautiful, beautiful people. And one of the things that they used to say a lot that kind of surprised me at first, but they would say, someone would ask them, "Oh, if you could wave a magic wand, or if there was a cure, would you give it to Jennifer?" And they said, "No, absolutely not. I love Jennifer, and it's a drag that there's a lot of things that she can't do, but I wouldn't change her for the world."
Yeah, yeah. I've been asked that question too. It's a very interesting question to think through. I mean, in one regard, it's like, well, this is ridiculous to ask because this is not an option, but also what it reveals. And the thing about like the broader disability story and experience is that it is so broad. And to say to somebody who is physically suffering with a disability, I would not change that. Like I'm not going to say that for somebody else. Right. But my kids with Down syndrome, if I were to separate Down syndrome, they wouldn't be who they are. So there is a sense of, I'm not even going to think about the question, because who they are is who they are. Like that, this is who they are. And you could never separate. Every cell in their body is affected by Down syndrome, and you can never separate it. And I think what also that question gives us an opportunity to think about is, what is it that makes disability so hard? And again, there are people with physical disabilities that are suffering within their disability. And that is like they're in pain and in suffering every day because of it. And to want that to go away, absolutely. But when I think about my kids with Down syndrome, the thing that is so hard about their disability has nothing to do with Down syndrome and everything to do with the world that has yet to understand Down syndrome. Now, that means where do we need the change to take place? I don't need to pray away Down syndrome. I need our world, right? I need our society. I need our systems that exist that serve people, like schools and churches and extracurricular and all these. That's where the change needs to take place, not in my kids.
One of the things that I first heard when I took the job and I attended a conference in New York City, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name, but the keynote speaker got up and said, "How can we expect these kids to change? They're not able to, but we're able to change. We're able to change the way we look at them. We're able to change the physical barriers that are preventing them to get to places. We're able to make the change, so why wouldn't we?"
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such a great way to reframe, the question even of like, would you change your kid with disability? It's like, well, I would change the world for my kid with a disability, for sure.
One of the things I love to ask authors is, what kind of conversations do you think families can have as they read I Like You So Much?
Oh gosh, I think this book is a very powerful tool for those conversations. Jed, you shared about being at the pool and being introduced to this community of people with disability, and you had an opportunity to be in real life relationship, in real life proximity with someone who's different. And that's just not the case for everybody in the world, right? We can't know all the different kind of people to have, because that relationship is really where the change is going to happen. But we have books which give us windows and doors into these stories. And so I Like You So Much, first of all, is that story that I hope parents and the conversation being brought up with your kids is having opportunity to point out the things you like about them that just make them them. And yes, encouraging the ways in which that they exceed at certain things and the things they can achieve and what they're really good at, but really kind of refocusing on having those conversations and just saying like, I like how you showed up today, this morning. I just like you. I like how you showed up in the room today, or I like your smile, or things that are just innately them. But also the book has, a lot of diversity in the illustrations of characters. And so there's opportunity to look at the different characters who are wheelchair users or who have limb differences or who have vitiligo on their face looks different, and to really sit down and let your kids ask those questions, right? Kids are so curious. And for a kid to point at a picture in a book and be like, what's this? And then together pull up good old Google or however you want to search for things these days and have a conversation around a wheelchair user in a park or a wheelchair user on a certain piece of playground equipment. And then those conversations, this book has so many opportunities of inviting parents and kids into the conversations that really are hard, can be harder conversations to have, and hopefully can spare you from the conversation in the park where the kid points at a kid in a wheelchair and says, what's wrong with them? Have the conversation in your living room first. So then when they get to the park, they're like, oh, I've seen this before. I know this. This is, quote, normal, right? I'm familiar with this. So every page gives you an opportunity for a conversation like that.
And hopefully that kid in the park will go over to the child in the wheelchair and say, hey, you want to hang out with me? You want to play?
Right. Yeah. Hey, what's your name? Cool. Yeah.
The thing I found when I created this, and to be honest with you, Heather, I think the school hired me. It was in a hospital, and all the people who ran the school were medical professionals, people who said, these kids can't do anything. And there was a grant money, and they took it, and they said, yeah, why don't you go out and try to integrate these kids into typical places. And I think they thought that it would be a big failure because there was no reason to hire me. I was just a dope that was lifeguarding in a pool. And it was a huge success. And we went into the school, the Boston Public School, that had the highest of all the bad things, the most parents incarcerated, the most parents involved with drugs, the poor, bad grades, whatever. Those kids embraced our kids so deeply and so quickly. And all it took was a conversation I had with the classes before, hey, I'm going to come over here. These are my kids in there. And it was like instant love. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I love that. It makes me want to like do a big case study on, well, as you're sharing that, I'm thinking of groups of people who have experienced being an outsider, right? Or have experienced not have a sense of not belonging because of their life circumstances, and bringing those two groups together. And they're such different groups, but both, it seems like, probably have this history or this life in which they've felt this lack of belonging, and therefore they're more open to creating belonging with others because they understand the need for it. I wonder about that. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it would have been good to study that, but that was like 45 years ago.
I'm sure someone out there who's our researcher.
Well, tell everybody, please, where they can go, not only to find out more about I Like You So Much, but also to support the advocacy and other activities that you're involved with.
Sure. So I'm Heather Avis, and you can go to heatheravis.com. And you'll be connected right away to my new book, I Like You So Much, which you can purchase anywhere books are sold. Wherever you buy your books, you should be able to copy. And then you'll get more information on the advocacy work I do. I love to be able to speak to different groups of people, from classrooms all the way up to executives, and talk about this idea of inclusion and belonging and how that makes the world that we're in a better place to be for everybody. And if you're on social media, on Instagram, my organization is called The Lucky Few. So we're The Lucky Few Official.
And I believe you have something tell me you have a podcast. It might be the little name in the corner there.
Yeah. I have a podcast. I have a podcast called The Lucky Few Podcast, and I co-host it with two other moms who have kids with Down syndrome. And we talk about all things Down syndrome. We have on experts and guests. We talk about our experiences. We hit up news articles like the one you had talked about earlier, the one about Iceland eradicating Down syndrome. We talk to hot topics and everything in between, just a place for people who want to connect with us or who have a loved one with Down syndrome to find that place of connection. So the Lucky Few Podcast.
Well, we had a great guest on a couple of years ago. Her name is Mia Armstrong, and she is.
I know Mia.
Oh, Mia. Okay. Well, then she'd make a great guest. Yeah.
Mia's been on the podcast. I love her mom. Yes, we're in the same little circle in many ways, and they're an awesome family. And her book, I Am a Masterpiece, is a wonderful book, friends. Yeah.
Well, if you see them, tell them Jedley in Boston said hi.
I will.
In the meantime, we want to encourage everybody to check out I Like You So Much. It is a brand new picture book from our guest, Heather Avis. Heather, you know what? The people in the tech world try to keep us apart today, but they failed miserably. We came through to make this happen. Thank you so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Dad, thank you so much for having me.
My friends, if you have ever thought about owning a business that's fun, rewarding, and makes a valuable contribution to kids' education, well, Brooklyn Robot Foundry is calling your name. I recently met Ginny Young. She's the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. And let me tell you, she is incredible. Her passion for getting kids excited about STEAM, that's STEM plus art, it's contagious. I'm telling you. This isn't your average kids program. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is all about hands-on, screen-free STEAM fun. These kids get to build a different robot each class and take it home with them afterwards. Kids love it. Parents are raving about it. And now you can own a franchise and bring this incredible experience to families in your community. Now, this isn't your typical franchise. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is a mobile, flexible business with a deep curriculum that's making a real impact in schools and communities around the country. Franchise owners get a proven curriculum, full training, and support from a passionate team. So what are you waiting for? Please visit bit.ly/RobotJed. That's bit.ly/RobotJed. And let them know you heard about it on Reading with Your Kids. Join us right now from the great state of Texas. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's book 2 in her series. The title is Charlotte and Penelope and the Neighborhood Stage. Please welcome to the show, Teresa Argenbright. Teresa, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you on. Tell me all about Charlotte and Penelope and why are they on stage?
Well, Charlotte and Penelope are two sisters. As a little bit of background, this is the second book in the series that features them, but I call it the Menagerie series because the sisters are sort of the main characters, but the Menagerie plays a big hand in both stories, and the Menagerie are their neighbors. And it's about the things that happen between the girls and their neighbors just happen to be an assortment of animals.
Oh, neat.
So hence, that's why they're the Menagerie.
So what's going on in book 2?
In book 2, the girls are always the ones who are the first to be outside every morning. They're the first ones to be outside to play and to plan what's going to happen. But this morning, both the girls wake up and they're not feeling too good. They have sniffles and sneezes, and their mom consults whoever she needs to consult and decides they need to stay inside for a day or two. So their friends are bereft that they're not going to get to play with Charlotte and Penelope, but they decide they want to figure out what they can do to make, things better for the girls and to make the days pass a little quicker. So they decide to put on a talent show. And so the Menagerie gets to work and they decide what their acts are going to be, and they decide what their costumes are going to be and who's going to do what, and they make assignments, and then the show happens and word gets out and the whole neighborhood shows up and it's a grand event.
Very neat, kind of reminiscent of those old-timey movies where we're going to put on a show.
Exactly. But reminiscent also of, my own childhood. I was always putting together a show with cousins for aunts and uncles or kids in the neighborhood. Or I remember I grew up in a very small town, and my first grade always did a first grade circus. So sure, I think most kids love the attention of performing or enacting their make-believe for the adults in their lives or their other friends, and even those who kind of maybe shy from the performance side, they can still get involved. And so this is sort of what that is all about.
It's interesting that you say that, and I agree. I have very fond memories of the school plays that I was in elementary school, and as I look back, we always did those things as a class. It wasn't like when you got to high school and you decided to be a theater kid. It was just sort of, hey, we're all going to do this. And I remember everybody having fun and being a part of it. But I also know that the greatest fear, or the fear that the greatest number of people express having, is the fear of public speaking. And so I'm wondering if we grow into that fear, if we're born naturally comfortable acting and being the center of attention, and then we kind of lose that and develop this fear of speaking in public.
That's a very astute comment, and there may be some truth in what you're saying. I feel like some kids are naturally more out there than others, and I think that is part of their DNA. But I also think every child should get the opportunity to develop a certain amount of self-confidence, even if it's just reading a poem in class, or, leading the Pledge of Allegiance in a school assembly or something like that, because, that's such a fertile learning ground for just learning how to communicate as an adult, and just learning how to look up and look in people's eyes, or at least look in their faces instead of casting your eyes downward and, being so inward. So, I think any opportunity that a child has to get in front of his peers is certainly so useful. And where that shyness comes in, I think it's different for all kids. But yeah, I think it does happen. And sadly, if we don't learn it early, the older we get, the harder it becomes to expose yourself in that way.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious if the idea of Charlotte and Penelope living next to a menagerie came from being in Texas, where I understand that there are more tigers living in Texas in captivity in private zoos and personal homes than there are living in the wild.
Huh. Well, that I can't speak to, but I do know we have some pretty interesting critters, across the street in the woods or under the bushes, or, we have the tarantulas and we have the stingrays and we have plenty of raccoons at times. So, and then my children grew up on a street where there were a lot of other kids their age. And at times I felt like they were kind of a menagerie too, depended on how dirty they got that day. But, ooh, man, sometimes they did resemble animals.
Tell me, what was the inspiration to create Charlotte and Penelope?
Well, it's interesting. Several people have asked me to backtrack. This is kind of a new career path for me. I didn't start writing children's books until about 3 years ago. But I had always written, and I had done, my hobby was doing fun little poems for friends and family for retirements and anniversaries and those types of things. But I had written a poem for my daughter's wedding that was in 22, and I read it there. And when she came home, or she and her husband came home from their honeymoon and we were together, just sort of out of the blue, she said, "Mom, you should write a children's book." And I kind of tossed it over my shoulder and said, "Yeah, right." It was not anything that I had ever considered. But at the same time, I had recently met two little girls whose names are Charlotte and Penelope. And I just loved their names. I loved the rhythm of their names and the way they fit together. And they just inspired imagination in me. And I was playing around with kind of a little, what I would call just a little doodle of an idea. And so when she said that, it sort of landed in the back of my mind, but I kept thinking about it. And one day I sat down and just kind of started playing with ideas and writing. And within about 3 days, I had quite a bit of content and started looking at it. And I thought, maybe I do have a book here. And so that was the inspiration. And one thing led to the next. And my first was Charlotte and Penelope and their magical menagerie, which is just sort of introduces you to all the characters in the other stories, and really had no thought that it could become a series until a friend of mine then read it and said, "You got a bunch of books here." She said, "You got a ton of stories just looking at all these characters." So it's, I've been led by the reactions of people around me and kind of learning how to just sort of let my imagination go. And it's just been kind of a natural evolution.
That's wonderful. And I love when our kids, whether they're kids or adult kids, gives us ideas. I've shared here on the podcast back in 2018, shortly after we launched Reading with Your Kids, my son texted me one day and said, "You should have LeVar Burton on your show." And I said, "Yeah, I should have $1 million in the bank too." But neither of those things are going to happen. But sure enough, 3 days later, I was communicating with LeVar's office, and he came on the show shortly after that.
Our kids lead us.
Absolutely.
They do.
One of the reasons I launched Reading with Your Kids is because I know that the relationship that I have with both my adult son and daughter were built on reading together and talking about what we're reading, and that grew into cooking with my kids and tossing the ball around with my kids. What kind of conversations can you envision families having as they're cuddled up reading Charlotte and Penelope and the neighborhood stage? You hit the nail on the head. My biggest vision for this book is to
enable another means for parents and children, I call them readers and listeners, whatever the relationship is between them, but to create an opportunity to just form a bond, having a fun time with a fun story. Some of the best moments with my kids were when we were, I'd get a kid under my arm and snuggled up into my rib cage, and we'd be reading a great story, and especially the ones that made all of us laugh. Mm-hmm. I have found that the books that I enjoyed reading to my kids were the ones that I felt I could form the biggest bond with my kids. And so my goal was to write a book that I would enjoy reading and one that made me giggle. And I hope I've added enough humor that's on both a reader level as well as a listener level so that everybody can get a good giggle and can feel good. But it's one of those books that both the parent and the child will want to read over and over. This one in particular, the neighborhood stage, just lends so many conversations as far as developing a talent, or if you were going to be in a show, what would you do? And give me an idea of what your act would be, or what song would you like to sing, or, those types of things. Or would you rather help build the stage or help make the sandwiches for everyone? And other ways, how can you help one of your friends who might be sick and you can't go over and play, but what's something you could do to make them feel better? There are all sorts of pathways for discussion, but my main goal is just to take 10 minutes and giggle together, because life is hard, and it's hard for parents. And I think being able to relax and share a smile and a fun time with a younger being is so therapeutic after a long day, or whether you're at home with your kids or you're away from them or whatever, but just having a few moments to just connect on a level that has really no other purpose than just let's spend some time together.
Amen.
That's what I really want.
I absolutely love that. One of the things I found, I have a very clear memory of performing a couple of shows. I think it was 3 shows in a day down in Philadelphia, jumping in my car, driving back to Boston through New York City. So probably 7 hours on the road, dealing with traffic and whatnot, being absolutely exhausted when I arrived at home, and sitting down because the kids wanted me to read to them. It was the last thing I wanted to do. But I sat down and we read together, and talk about recharging my battery and just turning my mood and my energy level completely around.
Exactly. And that's my whole purpose. And it really is a gift that we as adults can give ourselves, as well as having a benefit for the child too.
I absolutely agree. Tell me, you said that you started writing late in life. Did you have an inkling that, maybe one day I'm going to write a kid's book, or was your daughter's suggestion completely out of left field?
Completely out of left field. I have my most recent career. Well, I started out in advertising, and I wrote advertising campaigns, and then I went into nonprofit development. So I was writing fundraising campaigns, and then I kind of segued into, I had a business where I wrote grant requests for nonprofits, for grant funding requests for that. And I loved it. And it was it was very much a creative writing thing, because you try to find a funder who has these goals, and then you try to find the match in your nonprofit and align them. It's kind of a matchmaking process. And I loved it, but it was getting to where it really wasn't much of a challenge anymore, because I had done it so much. And I was really kind of questioning, is this what I really want to do? And, the saying is when the opportunity is right, the teacher appears, and that teacher happened to be in the form of the comment that my daughter made. But no, it was not. And I think had I gotten the comment earlier in my years, I wouldn't have even taken it seriously, because writing a book just seemed so far out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found that doing children's books, there's some parallels with grant writing, because you're always trying to take the kernel of your idea and distill and distill and distill and get it down to the purest form, really in a very small amount of words.
Mm-hmm.
And with kids' books too, with kids' books, I can allow my imagination to take off a whole lot more, but it's still, you've got a very limited capacity for pages and words, and you don't want to, it's not drinking from a fire hose, it's drinking from a very refined pitcher, I guess. And
Yeah.
so it was the farthest thing from my mind. But as I've gotten into it and realized, oh, this is fun. It's fun. I've had to learn the business of publishing and the business of book sales, which is very challenging, but it keeps me on my toes. So it's been so interesting.
Awesome. Well, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Charlotte and Penelope in the neighborhood stage and find out more about you.
Okay. Well, the best place is my website, which is teresaargenbright.com. It's all one word. It's a lot of letters, but it's all very phonetic. There's no H in Teresa, and everything else is just like it sounds. Or my books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the other places you would buy books. I have a curated playlist for each of the books on Spotify. And it's just songs that I feel like kind of match the mood of the book. And I feel like it's songs that you could play in the car and they wouldn't drive the kid crazy, nor would they drive the parents crazy. So you can search the title of the book on Spotify and find out what those playlists are.
I think this is the first time we've had an author tell us that. What would be at the top of the playlist for Charlotte and Penelope and the neighborhood stage?
I think the one that suits the story the most, I went really old school, but I went back to Cass Elliot, and it's Make Your Own Kind of Music.
Make your own kind of music. All right, cool.
That's it. And I think that tells the story of the book very explicitly.
That is wonderful. Well, we'll have to check that out, and we want to encourage everybody else to check out Charlotte and Penelope and the neighborhood stage. It is book 2 in the Charlotte and Penelope series from our guest, Teresa Argenbright. Teresa, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you, Jed, and I appreciate what you do.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Hey, we'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on X. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, our website is readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guests. Please be sure to check out Heather Avis's I Like You So Much. Great picture book that is changing narratives. Also want to thank Teresa Argenbright. Please be sure to check out Charlotte and Penelope and the neighborhood stage. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Stella Sheree. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.